Welcome back to this week's episode of Catching Flies podcast. I am Stephen Burton. With the NFL draft fastly approaching, this week we wanted to do some fun deep dives into the world of the mock draft. We're going to put our GM caps on and live our dream jobs of running the franchise, making the picks. And this isn't a what we think is really going to happen. This is a what I would do if I was in team A, team B's situation, who I would take. Here to help me break it all down, the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, the Greek philosopher, Pete Makatis. What's going on, Petey?
Hey, Stephen, thanks for that great intro. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Catching Flies. And yes, we're doing it. I've mentioned in previous episodes, I'm a sucker for mock drafting, for reading them, and just getting a chance to do one here is fun. And yes, as Stephen said, we are acting as if we are the GM of the team. So if the 49ers were in the first round and I was drafting for them, I would act as if I work for the 49ers and this next pick could be my job. That's the way I would be approaching it. And the one way we're going to be doing this is we're just going to go back and forth with the picks. Steven's going to take the odd picks. I'm going to take the even picks. And I might not agree with his picks. He might not agree with mine. But the draft goes that way. I mean, it's 31 independent minds, assuming everybody had a pick. And there being one pick short this year because of Miami's silliness. But yeah, you just got to go with the board. And, a couple times, I'm sure Steven's going to pick a player that I would have wanted to take, and I might snipe one of his players. That's just how it works. Yeah, we're doing it that way to show you what we think of this draft, what we think of the players involved. We could sit here and easily parrot what everyone else is doing. We're not going to do that. That doesn't give you any extra information. So as far as draft philosophy goes, mine is really simple. I'm going to go ahead and spill it out to you now. Steven can do it if he wants, or you can just dive into the picks. But I take the best player available. That's it. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts around it. You don't know what a need is. To me, that word makes no sense. I remember when the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb. They don't need a wide receiver. Well, where would they be without him now? Right. Draft picks aren't made for week one of the next season. They're made for years down the line. Aaron Banks was a second-round pick for the 49ers a couple years ago, and everyone was howling at how big a mistake it was because he hardly played his rookie year. Well, where would the 49ers offensive line without Aaron Banks be right now? He started every game. He missed one game for injury, I think, at left guard this year. And he slid right in for Laken Tomlinson, who signed a huge contract with the Jets. So you make the draft pick, you pick the best player. There's nothing wrong with taking a good football player. Right. Now, you might be wrong about who the best player is. That's one thing. You might misevaluate how good someone is, but you don't say, well, I think this guy's better. But right this very moment, I need a cornerback, so I'm going to take a cornerback and leave this really good tight end off the board. I mean, that's the way I draft. That's the way I do it. Any thoughts on that, Steve, or you just want to get started?
No, I agree with you. You got to try to take the very best player available that fits your team and your team's schemes. I mean, obviously, if you got Patrick Mahomes, you're probably not going to take a quarterback if it's the best person available.
Right.
But at the same time, you got to find the right guys for your schemes, for your philosophies, and guys that you think can be leaders and represent you and your team or your franchise in the best way possible. So, no, I agree with you. Take the best guy because reaching will get you in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many NFL teams that were, especially kind of the mid-tier teams that are, making the playoffs but getting knocked out in the first round or similar, just missing out on the playoffs. Oh, they're a corner away. Oh, they're a receiver away. And then those teams, they end up reaching and take guys rounds ahead of where they're projected, and then it gets them in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. You got to take the best person for your team and available.
Right, and that's a good
So,
point. That's a good clarification Steve made there too. Each team's going to have a different board
sure.
based on their needs. I mean, they might think this guy is better than this guy, but this guy kind of fits their team better. That best player available means a lot of different things.
Right.
And I didn't make a best player available list for every team. I just made my list and I just kind of went off it. And the starting quarterback situation is one thing. That's the one area where it doesn't really apply because one, you only play one quarterback at a time, and two, you don't rotate.
Right.
So when I hear draft experts, and I'm going to use every quotation mark in the world, say, "Oh, they can't take an edge rusher because they have so and so." What? I
Right.
mean, you can't have more than one good edge rusher.
Guys
No,
get hurt
he's
a
still
lot
my
in this
heart.
league.
Also
Right.
rotating is a thing, and you can do different schemes. You can actually scheme up your defense certain plays to get three pass rushers, three edge rushers out on there at the same time. Smart teams can do these things. When the Niners draft, I hate to use the Niners as an example again, but they're the team I follow, so I know what they've been doing. Nick Bosa was not a need when we drafted him. And where
Right.
would the 49ers be without Nick Bosa right
He was
now?
clearly the best
Yeah.
guy on the board.
Yeah. And that's just how it works. You grab the best player you can, and maybe it doesn't immediately become clear how I'm going to use this guy, but rookie contracts are 4 years long with a fifth year option.
For
So
first
you have,
rounders.
yeah, for first rounders, yeah. And by the way, all we're doing is the first round today.
Right.
And that will dictate how good that player is by that point.
Right.
So, Troy Polamalu was considered a bust after his rookie year, or at least on his way to being a bust. Now he has a bust. So that's a Hall of Fame bust, by the way, for those who missed that reference.
Right.
So, yeah, you take the best player you can, and that's it. Mm-hmm.
I agree with you there.
Yep.
So with that being said, the Colts, or I'm sorry, the
We thought it might be the
Panthers.
Colts. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, had them on my mind for some reason. The Panthers trade this week out of nowhere with the Bears, not the Colts, and secure the number one pick. So with that being said, I'm going to start with the odds. I think the Panthers traded up to get the quarterback of the future. They're a franchise guy in their eyes, and I think that's going to be C.J. Stroud from Ohio State. I think he opens the draft up as the number one pick. I think this guy he really impressed me against Georgia. I thought for a long time he was just another Ohio State scheme fit. The Texas Techs, the Ohio States, the Oregons. Every now and then they will get a guy that sticks, but most of those guys can put up 4,500 yards passing every year in those systems, and they never do anything in the pros. But I think C.J. Stroud's gonna really be the man. He impressed me going against a lot of pros on Georgia's defense, and the leadership that he displayed, willing his team back from blowing lead after lead in that game and not giving up. His scrambling ability was a lot better than I had ever seen. I thought for the most part he was a pocket passer, but he does have some wheels. Um, and I think Carolina has been looking for that face since Cam Newton left, and this is going to give them the hope of the future. So with the number one pick, C.J. Stroud, and
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you, number
Yeah.
two.
And I have no doubt that the Panthers made this trade to get a quarterback, of course. I would not I don't think CJ Stroud's the best player in the draft. I think the guy I'm about to draft is. And I'm up number 2 with the Houston Texans. And I'm giving him Jalen Carter out of Georgia. And we don't need to sit here and talk about how good Jalen Carter is at football. We know that. I guess
Oh yeah,
what's hurting Carter right now is the situation that's been taking place with him off the field. And that's, it's a cause for concern a little bit. Obviously, very tragic situation. We're not going to sit here and spill out all the details, but there's a difference between being involved with something that you shouldn't have been involved with and being a problem. We've all
right,
done bad things. I've done several bad things and have been lucky not for them to have tragic consequences.
right.
And I think that's the Jalen Carter situation here. He's going to regret this. He's going to live with it the rest of his life. But at the same time, I don't consider him a problem individual. He's not someone that I'm expecting to get arrested for fighting in a nightclub or anything like that. I think he is more likely than not to be a model citizen. So we chalk this up. He handled his situation from the legal end as well as anyone could have. I see him owning up to his part. I don't see him spending time in jail or anything. It's just wrong place, wrong time, wrong behavior, bad results. And it's unfortunate. Obviously, we're not discounting the impact it's had on many people's lives. But yeah, as far as football goes, he's the best player in the draft, and the Texans should be doing backflips to be getting him at number 2. So I got Jalen Carter, 2 to the Texans, and the Cardinals are on the board, and that's going to be Steven's pick.
All right, I agree with you absolutely. They're the best player in the entire draft. The Cardinals are really in shambles right now. I mean, Kyler Murray towards ACL. They tried to trade for a couple receivers. None of them's really working out. D Hop appears to be on his way out. But all that being said, I think you got to go best player, and the next best player to Jalen Carter in my eyes is Will Anderson, and that's the outside linebacker slash edge rusher. I think this he's got Khalil Mack esque ability, and I think he could just be your defensive captain for the next 8 to 10 years. Incredible linebacker, incredible speed. And when you draft high, there's a reason for it. Most of the time, you need a lot, so you just take the best guy. And if Jalen Carter is off the board, then I think they go Will Anderson for sure.
Yeah, that's a great pick. And we're going to have player comps from time to time. That's a great one. We haven't dove so deep into the draft that we have a comp for every single player, but we're going to have a few.
Sure.
And I've got one here. We're drafting the next Calais Campbell. If anything, I think this guy might be better than Campbell by the time it's all said and done. And that's a pretty high standard. I got the Indianapolis Colts. You're taking the best player. You're not reaching for a quarterback. There's no Christian Ponder situation. Sorry, Vikings fans, including the one next to me here, about taking that guy just because he plays quarterback. The next best player in the draft is Tyree Wilson, a edge rusher out of Texas Tech. And yeah, he does remind me of Calais Campbell. He's long. He can kind of play in and out. I don't think this dude's really even scratched the surface of how good he could be. I'm a Big 12 guy as a TCU fan, and I've seen this dude play, and he kind of scared me. He is really good. And I had an idea that he could be a high draft pick a couple years ago, and then the hype train came in. I was like, well, he deserves it. So yeah, Tyree going to the Colts. Who's going to play quarterback? Somebody will. I mean, somebody will. And it's easier for me to have the team in place first than get the quarterback rather than get the quarterback and then try to build the team. That's the way I look at it. So, Tyree Wilson off the board, Seattle Seahawks on the board, and that would be Steven's pick.
Well, I agree with you with the Colts. I think a lot of people believe they're going to take a quarterback, but
They're definitely going to take a quarterback.
They did this with luck, and he only lasted 4 or 5 years because he got his head beat in every game. Do you want to risk that with another quarterback? So that's just something to think about. So if the draft does play out like this and the Colts pass, I've got Seattle, even though they just signed Geno to a 3-year deal. I think they would take Bryce Young, let him set for a year. So I got Seattle, even though they were good this year. They made the trade with the Broncos, and so now they've got this pick. So I at 5 overall. I got to take Bryce Young, quarterback. Let him set for a year or two behind him, and maybe you got your next. Russell Wilson is going to be there 10 years.
There you go,
And
and that's but he does size wise. He's somewhere between Russ and Kyler Murray, I guess, without maybe quite the athleticism either one has. But there's a perfect example of maybe not making a need pick.
Right.
You just signed a quarterback to a bigger contract. But if Bryce Young is the best player on their board, you take him.
Yeah.
take him. That's it.
And if a couple teams ahead of you pass on it, I mean, quarterbacks are cheap the first few years, so it's not like that they can pay Geno and have another guy learning.
Yeah.
So that would be my thought behind it.
So with the next pick, I've got the Detroit Lions, the first of their two picks. We ought to mention that Seattle, that's also the first of their two picks. They got that pick in the Russell Wilson trade. That's actually Denver's pick at number 5, and the Lions have the Rams pick at number 6. Never before has a Super Bowl champion fallen all the way to the 6th pick the next year. But guess what? It's not even their pick. The Lions have it. And I'm going to take a guy who's never been mocked this high in any mock draft that you're reading out there. And when we're going to eventually do a predictive mock draft. This guy's not going to be in this spot. But to me, he's the best player in the draft at this point. He is a potentially bigger, stronger version of Tyrann Mathieu. And that guy got slept on, and he got picked in the 3rd round, and he became an all-pro. Injuries hurt him, but when he was on top, he was on top. And I'm giving the Lions our 3rd Alabama player in the top 6. I wonder why they're good every year. Huh? I'm calling him defensive back, Brian Branch. And I'm not going to peg him as a corner or as a nickel corner or as a slot corner or as a safety, because he can do all of that. And I love that kind of versatility in a player. You want as many queens on the chessboard as you can on your defense. And unless you're playing baseball, in which case they tell you exactly where to stand. We talked about that last week, guys. Check out that episode. But yeah, Brian Branch can give you just about anything you need on defense. And I see him as a guy that Dan Campbell would love. And if I'm the Lions GM and I'm giving Dan Campbell Brian Branch, I know I'm making him happy. So this dude can ball, and Detroit has pieces, and this is another piece. And you want to build the best football team you can. You do that by taking the best player you can. And I think Brian Branch is the best player on the board. He goes to the Lions. And that would send pick number 7 over on the Stevens side. And he is the now the GM for the Las Vegas Raiders.
With the 7th overall pick, the Las Vegas Raiders, we take Anthony Richardson. I think he's good. He's got to be the franchise quarterback for the next 10 to 12 years. I mean, you got to believe that. And this guy has probably the best physical upside of any quarterback in the draft. His accuracy, he's got to work on, but he never really had any elite receivers in Florida to really bring that out of him. So I think once he gets around bigger talent, this guy is really going to blossom. He's going to help the Raiders, and the search is finally over. Hopefully, in their eyes, they've got their guy.
And that's an excellent point. We're talking about how much production these guys have. Sometimes the production isn't there. The lack of production, we might say, isn't on them. And that's how guys like George Kittle fall to the 5th round. He wasn't productive at Iowa. He wasn't used that way. And yeah, Anthony Richards didn't have the greatest talent around him. And he is my favorite QB in this draft. And he'd be the first one I would take. So, and if you look at the film, maybe it doesn't say so, but a lot of this projection too. And that brings me to my next pick at number 8. We're taking a guy who technically wasn't a starter in college. And it's an Iowa thing, isn't it? Iowa seem to misuse their players. They have all this talent,
Always.
but they never win anything. So the Falcons are on the board, and I'm giving them Lucas Van Ness at number 8. And again, that's higher than other draft mock drafts have him. But I'm going to say a Niner player. I see Eric Armstead and this guy, another guy that can be inside outside. I'm listing him as a defensive line. Not going to call him an edge, not going to call him a tackle, because I think he'll do both. So Lucas Van Ness, who maybe will struggle his rookie season. I understand that's a possibility, but when this class comes back 4 years later for an analysis, I see him as one of the top guys. And Steven made this point with the Cardinals. When you're bad, you're bad. And the Falcons, they had the 8th pick, but they weren't the 8th worst team in the league. They were probably something worse than that. A very, very, very easy division. If they played in any kind of good division, they'd be challenging for the first pick this season. So they take the best player you can. And I think that person is Lucas Van Ness. And now we go back to the team that did finish with the number 1 pick in this draft, and they traded out of it for a bunch of picks and a player. The Chicago Bears on the clock, and Stevens got that pick.
The Bears, like you said, number one, they need a lot. They're working their tail off in free agency. But if I'm the Bears, I'm taking the best corner in my eyes in this draft, and that's the Spoon Man. And out of Illinois, so you can question who he was going up against a little bit. It wasn't the SEC per se, but this guy still he's a freak physically. His cover skills and tackling skills are top notch, and in a very good corner class. I mean, there's 4 or 5 guys that could easily go in the first round. I got him at the highest, so I think the Spoon Man gives them a great solid piece to start building on defensively.
Local
Uh,
boy, yeah,
that too.
Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. He'll definitely get up there, and he's got like the small dog mentality. He's not the biggest dude in the draft, but
Right.
he'll get up there and hit you. And yeah, Steven mentioned the corner class. It is pretty deep, and I think the way the NFL is going these days, I'm going to be surprised to see more than that many. I could 6, possibly even 7 corners going into first round, especially if you consider Brian Branch a corner,
Right.
which he is because he can do everything. And I've got a corner going number 10. I am now picking for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it just worked out this way. Corner is a position that's been mocked to them a lot, and the next best player on my board just happens to be a corner, and this dude is making his way east across the state of Pennsylvania. Started off in Pittsburgh, where I believe he was born. At least his father played for Pittsburgh. Played at Penn State, and now is going to Philadelphia. I've got Joey Porter Jr. of Penn State as the next Philadelphia Eagle. And again, this is a pick that is not theirs. This was the Saints pick, and the Saints traded it last season to move up to draft Chris Olave. So you can argue that was somewhat worth it. And he was obviously had a good rookie year. Yeah, but Joey Porter is a physical guy. His dad played linebacker in the NFL. So
Right.
he's a corner with a linebacker mentality. And that fits Philly to a T.
Yeah.
So I'm Philly. I love this pick.
I love that.
You got, and if you want to go ahead and analyze the position, Bradbury's probably on his way out. Darius Slay, if I'm not mistaken, once out. So,
He's supposed to be traded.
yeah.
Yeah.
So reload. And even if that wasn't the case, if both of them were coming back, I still make this pick. I
Yeah.
still make this pick because
He's that
guess
good.
what? He's not just playing week 1 next year. He's going to be there for a few years. So he's the top player on my board. I'm giving him to Philly. And we're going to go down south toward the Tennessee Titans. That's Steven's pick. Who you got for them?
We here in Tennessee have to be very disappointed and upset with the shortcomings of this team. It looks so promising. We decided to blow it up. So in my eyes, the Titans need a lot. If I'm the GM, what better to start at rebuilding your team and franchise than the left tackle position? I'm taking Broderick Jones, left tackle out of Georgia. To me, he's the best tackle in the draft, and if he falls this far, the Titans got to love it. They let Ben Jones walk, and he was kind of the captain of the O line for a decade. I mean, great player, but I think Broderick Jones could be the next guy that's there for 8 to 10 years that holds down the fort. And when you need a lot, that's a premium position. If you can get a talent like Broderick, you take it. This guy was unbelievable. He didn't give up a sack at Georgia, his entire career. So I love it. I love Broderick Jones, man.
And that's, he's not playing in the Missouri Valley Football Conference or anything like that. It's
Right.
the SEC not giving up a sack. That's pretty impressive. I'm up again with the Texans. This is their second pick. And this is where all the people are going to say Pete's an idiot. And that's fine. People are allowed to believe that and be wrong all they want. So this is the Texans pick from Deshaun Watson. Got a lot of picks, a lot of high picks got traded this year, didn't they?
For sure.
And I'm taking the next player on the board. And that's Kalijah Cansey, defensive tackle from Pittsburgh. But Pete, didn't you just give them Jalen Carter? How can you give them 2 defensive tackles? Teams have more than two defensive tackles. And imagine if you got two guys who are potentially going to be this good holding down your D for the next few years. You don't think that make the Miko Ryans happy?
Right.
The new head coach of the 49ers,
Plus,
of the Texans, who used to be the 49ers.
I was gonna say, plus Carter can play DN. I mean, he's such a freak athlete that so you're not really taking two D tackles, you
No,
know.
you're taking
You're
two
getting
football
two
players.
guys,
Yeah,
right,
you're
that can
taking
play
two
any
football
position.
players. Now, Kalijah Cansey, everyone wants to say Aaron Donald with him. Not that they're comparing him to Aaron Donald, because that's too much to ask of anybody. But, slightly undersized, coming from Pitt, might get drafted in about this range where Aaron Donald went. So those are
It
the
is
natural
weird.
comparisons. This is who I see in Kalijah Cansey. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as this guy. I'm saying this is his potential. And this is a Hall of Fame Viking player. I'm talking about John Randall.
John
I'm not
Randall.
saying he's going to be John Randall, but I'm saying he could be John Randall. This is a guy that was undrafted because of
Right.
his size. I mean, again, we're not talking about a little guy. He's like 280 pounds, and they're calling him small. Go say
Right.
that to his face, dude. No, he's not small. He's small a little bit for a D tackle. I understand that, but it's not like he's going to get beat up. When people
Right.
talk about Bryce Young's size concerns, it's because he might get beat up. No one
Yeah.
gonna beat this dude up here. It's not gonna happen. Kalijah Cansey is, probably, if this scenario plays out, which it won't, he wouldn't start for Houston probably this season. I think Jalen Carter would, and Cansey we brought along a little bit more. But we're talking about where he's going to be in 4 years, and if he's got D'Amico Ryans, he's going to be in a Pro Bowl within the
Yeah.
next 4 years. So, yeah, so double dip, so to speak, with the Texans. This is the way my board fell. And if I'm the Texans, I'd be thrilled with this. You fortify that defense and you get those guys off the field and give your offense a chance. So someone like Davis Mills, who would still be the quarterback in this scenario for me, isn't forced to play from behind all the time. And you sit there and you think maybe he's not that good. What chance has this dude had? He's got a terrible team. He's on his third head coach in 3 years. Um, but he's the
No
problem. But
playmakers.
he's the
Right.
problem. So yeah, the Texans aren't going to do this. They're going to waste their pick on a QB who shouldn't go that high, in my opinion. And they're going to leave these great football players to other teams. So now that brings us back over east, New York Football Jets. That's Steven's pick, and go for it, Bubba.
Well, if I'm the Jets, you got to take the bet. I'm sorry. Let me start fresh there. If I'm the Jets, you need a lot still. They seem to hit on Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. They're building the offense up. I think to have a good offense, you got to have a great offensive line. If I'm the Jets GM, I'm going with the next best tackle, in my opinion, Paris Johnson from Ohio State. Could probably be left or right tackle, but you gotta protect the quarterback. If whether that's Rodgers, Mike White left yesterday. Whether it's Zach Wilson or whoever, you got to protect him. And Paris Johnson's a great piece to do that. So if I'm the Jets, that's who I go with, Paris Johnson.
And funny enough, I think if the Packers do wind up with this pick, it's a perfect pick for them too. So
Yeah.
Paris Johnson right at the 13 raw spot. That sounds good. That sounds good. Now their division rival Patriots are up. And, this is another one of those situations for me where the position happened to line up with what most mock drafters are giving the Patriots. I'm giving them a wide receiver. And it's probably not who you think. I have a different wide receiver one than most other people do. And this is particularly shocking if you happen to remember that I'm a TCU fan and I don't have Quentin Johnston as my number one receiver in this draft. I have Ohio State's. That's even more hurtful to me. Ohio State's Jackson Smith and Jigma as my number one. I am not going to make the mistake I made with Justin Jefferson. When Justin Jefferson was coming through, I'm like, this guy's a fringe first rounder at best because he can only play the slot.
Right.
That was wrong. I was very wrong. Okay.
A lot
And
of people were
well, not to the
on him.
Vikings weren't. They
The
took him the
Vikings were
22nd, 23rd pick.
22nd.
22nd. Okay. which obviously if we did that draft again, he would not go that low. And he is a guy that can line up all over the field. And I think Smith and Jigba can do the same. We should not forget this dude was the best wide receiver on that team when they had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And both
That's
these guys have
scary.
shown up, at least in their rookie years, have shown lots of potential in the NFL. And I think Smith and Jigba can be better than both of them. And you put him with the mad scientist mind of Bill Belichick, and who knows what they can get done there. So, of course, in this situation, I would be Bill Belichick. I'm pretty sure he is the de facto GM of the. He doesn't hold the title, but he basically makes all the picks. So
Nobody's
I'm Bill
telling.
Belichick here for a minute. I'm picking Jackson Smith and Jigma for myself. And that would pass the draft back over to Steven, where he's got the Green Bay Packers.
No, I agree with you there. Great pick, especially with Myers leaving yesterday. So, okay, so with the next pick, I'm the Green Bay Packers. You've got seemingly Rodgers leaving. I'm literally watching it real time, waiting on the announcement. So that means Love is the guy, basically. If he's the guy, he needs weapons. If I'm the Green Bay Packers, that's my top priority. If I can't protect Love, I want to give Love a weapon. I'm giving him Quentin Johnson, TCU, wide receiver. Something the Packers haven't done in 75 years is take a receiver in the first round. So I think it's time to break that streak. I think it's legitimately like 20 something years, but they never gave Rodgers that number one high upside like receiver guy, first round guy. Now they found some gems, obviously, but I think they don't make the same mistake with Love. They get him a guy, Quentin Johnson.
It's a funny draft, folks. I took
It is
Jalen Carter and Steven took Quentin Johnson. You would think it'd be
right.
the opposite, but hey, this is how it works. Washington commies are up next, and oh, is that their name? Oh, the Washington Commandos.
Oh, that's what they yell at their stadium is "Let's go commies, let's go."
Whatever they're calling themselves anywhere, Washington. And this is not a position you have seen draft nicks, draft mockers giving Washington. And that's too bad because he's the best player on the board at this point, as far as I'm concerned. And at this point, I'm the GM. And I'm giving him Clemson's edge rusher, Miles Murphy. Oh, but Pete, they have Chase Young. Oh, but Pete, they have Montez Sweat. Now you got a third guy. Yeah, now you got a third
Well,
guy.
they just paid Payne, so they
Yeah.
can't keep them all. You're gonna have
No,
to
and
replace
that's a
one.
possibility too. Yeah.
Right.
That's the one thing we're not doing here as the GMs. We don't know what the contract situation of every single one of our players are.
Right.
I don't know what Washington's, and we could look it up, but that's a lot. That's a lot of work. GMs only know their own contract situations. I'm not going to try to figure out 15 other teams. But
Right.
yeah, Miles Murphy, he's the best player, and he's also a guy who's probably not going to do much his rookie season. He is a little bit more raw. He's young. He is a dude you can build around. And imagine he comes into his own, and him and Chase Young are coming after you.
Both
Right?
sides.
And then you got someone like Montez Sweat who maybe attracts some trade bait. Maybe he plays inside. Maybe he's part of a disgustingly difficult rotation to deal with. I mean, anything's possible. You take the best player. And I got Miles Murphy on the board next, and I'm handing him over to the Commanders. And speaking of handing over, Steven gets the Pittsburgh Steelers coming in at the 17th pick. Steve, you are Kevin Colbert. I think no, I might be living in the past. I forget who the who the Steelers GM is. That
Tomlin's
might be that.
Tomlin's taking the pick.
He
He's the
might be. What
coach.
is gonna? Yeah, you're Mike Tomlin. So in other
No,
words, Omar Epps is gonna play you in the future. What you got with this pick?
well, if I'm the Steelers and in this draft happens the way we've laid it out, I'm definitely sad that Spoon Man and Porter's gone. But if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm taking the next best guy, and that's Christian Gonzalez, Gonzo from Oregon State. Man, this kid, he's tackling machine, covering machine. He's got great size, great measurables. The Steelers, they still got Watt and a couple other great guys on defense, but they need losing Sutton and other guys. You got to replace them and hold down the fort in secondary. So Christian Gonzalez looks like he's going to be that guy.
So going from one blue collar city to another, and one blue collar team to another, Detroit Lions are back on the board. This is their actual pick. They were the NFL's best team this season, not to make the playoffs, which is why they're at 18. And I'm giving them a dude who's just a man, and it's Osiris Torrance. And I'm listing him as guard out of Florida. The Lions, you know how they are, man. You know how Dan Campbell, they're knee biters, as it were. And
Want
this
some
guy's
knee
a knee biter.
breakers?
This guy's a knee biter. And again, it doesn't sound like a little bit of a broken record here. A guy who might not be all the way into the lineup in his first season. But can you imagine a few years from now him standing next to Penei Sewell, just mauling people? It'll make life easier for everybody. And Sewell has kind of quietly become a very, very good offensive lineman. I think he gets stuck behind Rashawn Slater and Christian Darrisaw a little bit. Not that they're not great players, they absolutely are, but they're left tackles, and Sewell's been playing right tackle, and I think that automatically elevates the other two guys in a lot of people's minds. I take any of them. I take
Oh
any of
yeah,
all three of them. They're all three to me the future of the NFL at that position, and putting Torrance right there too. And I like him at guard. Um, Even if he plays right guard, he'll be right next. I mean, that'll be potentially the best right side of the offensive line in all of football. And if you have a decent enough left side, which of course Detroit has that too, that makes everyone's life easier. Whoever's playing quarterback right now, it's Jared Goff, could be someone else in the future. Whoever's playing running back, whoever's playing wide receiver, all you get better when you got a great line. And I'm giving you Osiris Torrance, one of the most unique names in this draft. I kind of like it. Kind of like it. I
yeah.
think Osiris is more likely to be a last name, and Torrance, the way he spells it, is more likely to be a first name. So that's just me having fun with. I'm having fun with that. So the Lions used to share a division with Tampa Bay once upon a time, and now they share side by side draft picks. Tampa Bay is up as the NFL's worst team that made the playoffs at number 19. Steve, you got Tampa.
Tampa did somehow make the playoffs, but we're not sure how.
No.
This team is completely falling apart. Let's be honest. If you're the GM, you got to be looking at so many different angles. Brady's gone. Other guys are bailing out now. This team got old fast after winning the Super Bowl. But to me, it seems like Tampa, and being a defensive mind head coach, would love to keep that defense strong, and that's going to keep them competitive. And so, with that said, we here at Tampa take Cam Smith, a cornerback from South Carolina. I think it's going to give them a lockdown guy on the inside and outside. This guy's an interception machine. And, he played in the SEC, which I'm a big fan of. I like guys from big conferences that go against top talent weekly. Um, so Cam Smith, I think he goes to Tampa. He helps them out, and a team that's really going to be rebuilding this year.
Yeah, they let Brady do it to him. They
They
got
went all
themselves
in.
they got
They did
themselves
get
like $60 million over the cap. They're gonna be in trouble for a while. And of course everyone's gonna say, oh, Brady left. That's why they're bad now.
right. You just have to weigh, was one
Eh,
Super Bowl worth it, or for
Super
5 to 10 years of
Super Bowl.
bad? Right. Was
Yeah,
one Super Bowl worth 5 to 10 years of
yeah,
cap struggles and down years? But
Super Bowl.
that was an interesting
COVID
year.
Bowl. Anyway, all righty. I got Seattle now. This is Seattle's
Seattle.
actual pick. And, it's funny the way this worked out. Quick side note. Um, with us switching picks back and forth, Steven and I have both kept the same team for those picks. This is the only one I think that we didn't, where he had the first Seattle pick and I have the second Seattle pick. And he went offense with the first pick. I'm going offense with the second pick. And this is a guy I do have a comp for, and I'll be very specific why. I've got Peter Skoronsky, who no mock draft has him falling to 20. I'll tell you that right
Oh,
now. This is the way it worked out for us. This is what we would do draft, of course. And my comp for Skoronsky is Jonah Williams. And here's why. A guy that played tackle at a high level that needed to move to guard. And Jonah Williams' numbers for you Bengals fans, probably not fond of them. But he is a good offensive lineman. He really is. He just needed to play guard. And I think Skoronski's going to have to play guard as well. And that's actually where we got him listed here. And we got him listed as a guard. And Seattle's just perennially not had the best of times on the offensive line. So this is also one of those like need meets value kind of picks. They hit in the draft last year with the tackles. Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas. I think Abraham Lucas is the third round pick. Almost looked better than Cross, the first round pick. But Cross is always going to be a little bit of a project. So you potentially hit those two guys to be your starters for many years. You build that interior, and all of a sudden Seattle has me scared as a 49er fan. I'm already a little scared, and Seattle's up and coming. And I'm not in the business of trying to help Seattle, but in this particular exercise, I am their GM, and my job is on the line. So I got to take the best player I can. So Skoronski, with the idea of moving him to guard to Seattle. And West Coast, keeping the love going. We have the erstwhile San Diego, currently Los Angeles. It's been 5 years. I still call them San Diego sometimes. The LA Chargers are up. Steven's got that pick. Who you got?
Well, if you're the Chargers GM, you're in a very unique place. You've got a great team, but so many guys getting hurt, so many guys getting older. This might be a little bit strange, but I think despite having Eckler, you want a nice fresh set of young legs to keep that offense rolling. I'm taking the best running back in the entire draft. I'm not a huge running back in the first round guys, but this guy's pretty special. He could be the next Saquon-esque type of player. I'm taking Brian Robinson, running back Texas, if I'm the Chargers. And I'm feeding him and Eckler, just feeding them.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having two guys. Bijan's definitely one of the big guys out there. Running back first round. If he's the best player on the board, you take him. You take him.
I love him in that offense. I mean, they feed the running back the ball, obviously, and I think he could be offensive rookie of the year.
Oh, I think it would definitely be the favorite if he was drafted right there. Excellent. Sure. All righty. Now I got Baltimore and the Ravens. There's a whole situation with them right now. It's unresolved for the most part regarding Lamar.
Very interesting spot. Yeah,
but taking the best player available. And it's an edge rusher out of Georgia Tech. And it's a guy who is rising up the boards for a lot of people. That's Keon White, the size speed combo, some untapped potential there. And there's always the possibility that their pick from a couple years ago, Odafe Owe, he backtracked, I guess. And I'm not going to say he was bad, but he backtracked last season. And then if it turns out that he's good, and now you got Keon White, now you got two of them. It's a pattern we're going to keep going with, folks. As far as I'm concerned, you can't have too many good edge rushers. It's not possible, unless your team is going to be 53 edge rushers and no one's going to be able to play anything else. If you have a certain number of spots on your roster allocated for an edge rusher, they can all be very good. It's allowed. It's okay. So if Keon White turns out really good, then you just got another guy that you can plug in there to get after the quarterback. And I struggled with this pick as far as which edge rusher to give it to, because I had two guys rated really close to each other. And given where this guy played, I got a gut feeling Steven's going to take him eventually. But even is up next, and he's got the his own Minnesota Vikings on the board.
Well, if I'm Minnesota now, I'm very happy because let's be honest, the Vikings had a great offense. They had the best receiver in the league. They put up a lot of points, but their defense couldn't stop a little league flag team's offense. I mean, it's just atrocious. And they let Eric Kendricks walk. So now it's time to rebuild the linebacker core. I'm Minnesota. I'm taking Nolan Smith, the physical freak, the potential team captain. This guy loved Georgia. He got hurt senior year, but still was on the sideline all year long with a towel swinging around his head, willing the fans on, willing the team on, he helped the younger linebackers and edges there so much this year, despite being injured. And this guy is just the highest of high characters. He's a physical freak. I mean, he's 6'2", 6'3", 240, and he ran a 4.38 at the combine. It's just unreal. What more could you ask for? A potential captain and force. Nolan Smith, outside linebacker.
I just spoke that into existence. Then, for some reason, I'm sitting here ranking my players, and it kind of came natural. And then when it came to Keon White and Nolan Smith, I just kind of stopped. I'm like, man, like that stopped me. That stopped me. Like that particular comparison. So you best believe Nolan was going 24 to Jacksonville right here. If you didn't
Oh,
take it, we would have reunited him with Travon Walker for one thing. But
absolutely.
that said, I'm giving Jacksonville a Clemson player. Now, stop me if you've heard this before, but I think the Jaguars like drafting people out of Clemson. They took Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne in the same draft,
Number
and it
one
just
and
so
number
happens
two.
it just landed in this spot. I'm giving him Brian Brisset out of Clemson to play on the D line, the defensive tackle position. Injuries are the only problem with this guy, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. I mean, he was the number one recruit for a reason, and if he was
Yep.
all the way healthy, I probably have him going in the top 10.
He would, yeah.
Um, but
Top
you
five,
gotta,
top 10.
yeah, and you gotta balance that ability with the injury risk. And I think 24 is a safe enough place for that. I think it kind of fits where he should go as far as position, and I think the Jaguars would welcome him aboard. The Jaguars are a pretty balanced team. The draft gurus out there, and I don't have enough quotation marks in the world for that, but they are talking about the Jaguars as a team with very few needs. Of course, everything's a need, by the way. Everything's a need because you always need good football players. And
Always get
defensive
better.
tackle, they just re signed a couple of Roy Robertson Harris. I believe is the one that got the extension. They got Davon Hamilton. Okay, now you got Brian Brisset, and you can try to wreak some havoc on some teams. And they not playing in a very overwhelming division at the moment. As long as they keep filling that roster with good football players, they can own the division for a couple of years. So I consider Brisset the next best player on the board. Let's see who Stevens got as the next best player on the board for the New York Football Giants.
Well, here in New York, we just gave Danny Dimes 40 mil. He's got to have somebody to throw the ball to. I'm going wide receiver, Jordan Addison, USC. Some people have him as their number one receiver or number two receiver. I mean, with him, Johnson, and a couple other guys, they're all kind of interchangeable in my eyes. So I think Addison, if he's on the board, he's a giant.
Sounds good to me. I think he would fit that offense too. So that's another, as far as his skill set, would fit that offense. So good eye for that one. Got the Cowboys. Technically my hometown team, and no, not technically, they are my hometown team. And this is a position you're not seeing mocked to the Cowboys. We're talking offensive line. It's like, oh my goodness, they took Tyler Smith last year. Okay, now Tyler Smith might be a better guard, and I would say that if they draft an offensive tackle here, that would be a good pick. And it's who I would give them. It's not someone you hear in the first round too often. He sneaks into some conversations. I'm talking about OU's Anton Harrison. And the Cowboys have had success drafting people from OU in the past. And it's like fairly local, I guess. And the states border each other after all. But yeah, Anton's a big fella. This
Okay.
guy is, I think, a little bit more NFL ready than some of these other tackles that are being talked about in this spot. The Jalen Duncan types of Maryland, the Darnell Wright types of Tennessee. I think not only is he more NFL ready, I think he's got the best projection for a good career. And Tyron Smith, been injured. I don't want to call him
Right.
old because he's not really old, but you can't count on him really anymore. And if
No.
he can't stop you, he and someone I remember last year, oh my goodness, where people were doing mock drafts for Dallas. I heard two different mock drafts say this. Well, they're set at right tackle. They have Terrence Steele. Terrence Steele doesn't stop you from drafting somebody. I'm sorry. He's a fine
Right.
football player. He's fine. But he doesn't stop you from drafting someone if he's the best player on the board. And at this point, I got Anton Harrison. To me, he's almost a top 20 type player in this draft, and he's got to go at this point. and the Cowboys will use him. And that is one thing I'll give Jerry Jones credit for. He'll draft the best player on the board. CeeDee
Yeah.
Lamb was at a time when they had Michael Gallup and they had Cole Beasley and they had Amari Cooper.
Cooper.
And they still drafted CeeDee Lamb, and he is by far their top receiver. He's a Pro Bowler, and I can't imagine the Cowboys' offense without him. So Anton
No.
Harrison goes to the Cowboys, and Buffalo Bills are on the clock now, and Steven's got that pick.
All right. And Buffalo, I mean, Stephon Diggs did an interview a couple of days ago and said it best. They're just, like they've got the team, they got the players. They're going to the AFC championship game every year. They just can't win the big one. They're such a great team, though. I I really struggled for a little bit with this, trying to figure out what position would help them the most, without seeing free agency, of course. But if I'm Buffalo, and in this scenario I'm giving Josh Allen everything. And if Darnell Washington is on the board, I'm taking him. To me, this guy he's a left tackle that plays tight end. He is the best blocking tight end in the draft. He is 6'7", 280, can run like a 4'6", and can jump over cars. Uh, the guy is unreal freak athlete. The only reason he got so overshadowed, and this is honestly, it's insane that he's a first round guy despite not being the number one tight end in his entire career at Georgia. I mean, Brock Bowers is this, generational guy, but that's what it took to keep Darnell as like the backup. But Darnell is the best blocking tight end that I've seen in a while. He can run, he can catch, he can hurdle guys. He's a freak. And, you got Davis, Diggs, and Darnell, and Knox, and Cook, and Allen, and, you're set if you're Buffalo. So I'm taking Darnell Washington.
Number one tight end in the draft this year, and another perfect example of a guy whose college production should not prevent him
No,
from being a high draft pick because, yeah, he got stuck behind Brock Bowers, who, spoiler alert for next season, folks, is going to be a very high pick in our mock draft.
probably top five.
I consider him at number one. I mean, he's that
Yeah.
good. So that gives me the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is definitely a position you're not seeing mocked to them. They got the J boys. They got DJ Reader, BJ Hill down there on the interior, the defensive tackle. But I'm giving them another one, and I'm giving them a guy who just you're not hearing in the first round. And this guy is potentially the next Vince Wilfork. And I'm talking about Siaki Ika
Oh,
out of Baylor. And I think he started his career at LSU, if I'm not mistaken, right? He won a national title with them.
I believe he was
Um,
with Burrow there.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
the
then
year.
he was very young then, and he was a man. He was definitely a man. He's even more man now.
He's a
And
beast.
BJ Hill and DJ Reader are fine football players. DJ Reader specifically is very good. Doesn't hurt to have another guy there.
Well,
And
Cincinnati's going to have to pay a lot of guys coming up real soon,
yeah,
and you're not going to be able to keep some. And you've
yeah,
seen one leave yesterday, and Bates,
yeah.
and
And Bell left too. They lost
Bell
both their
left. Yeah.
safeties. Yeah,
So you're going to have to load up. That's a
you
great
take the
pick
best
for
player
them.
you can. And this guy's a space eater. You did resign Jermaine Pratt, which I thought might not be possible. So you
Right.
got Pratt and Logan Wilson. You want these guys free. You want
Right.
them roaming. And
And
if
this
you got
guy's a
Siaki
beast.
Ika, yeah, if you got him eating up an offensive lineman, these guys are going to roam. And it's what you want. Again, you could have a situation where BJ Hill can get you a draft pick
Right.
if it gets to that point, and you replenish with that too. So, yep, Ika to me is a sleeper. I would love to see him go higher in this draft. The way it fell, he went 28 to Cincinnati, and now we are going to the pick that has been passed around so many times we barely know whose it is anymore. It started with the 49ers, it went to the Dolphins, it went to the Broncos, it is now with the Saints. Goodness, don't be surprised if it doesn't get traded to again. The Saints are up, and this is Steven making the pick. What you got?
All right. If I'm New Orleans, you need a lot. Let's be real. Um, if this guy's on the board, I got to take him. I mean, he's got the most upside. I'm going Will Levis, quarterback. He's got the big arm. Everyone knows that. His comp is Josh Allen, but I don't really like that other than the strong arm comparison because to me he doesn't run as good. But this guy's he's a high upside potential bust though. High potential bust as well though. And if you're New Orleans, you got to get a guy. Derek Carr, he's older. Yeah, they locked him in for 4 years, but the way contracts are, you can get out quickly. So I think if he's still available, he's a strong arm guy. I'm taking Will Levis to Saints in hopes of finding my next franchise quarterback.
Guys, just remember, understand this, please. This is what we would do draft. We do not expect Will Levis to draft all the way to 29.
Wow.
He will be drafted much higher when we do our predictive mock draft. We're going to do one of those that's going to be reflective of that. So don't yell at us, please. This is what we would do. Or yell us if you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
So I'm up with Philadelphia again. This is their natural draft pick. It should have been the 31st pick. We did mention that the Dolphins, like dummies, tampered with guys they didn't wind up with that weren't worth it in the first place, and they lost their first round pick in the process. So the Eagles picking 30th, and I'm doing another double dip because as the next best player on the board, they took Joey Porter at corner with the first pick. I'm giving him Keely Ringo, and this guy seems to have lost a lot of favor with people. This guy was being mocked borderline
Like
top
top,
10,
yeah.
and I haven't seen him in the first round in a while. And it may turn out to be the case that he won't be. It seems like Georgia has a player fall every year. Nakobe Dean did that last year. And usually these guys got Jamar Salyer dropped so far last year. And in a redraft, he'd be a borderline first round pick. So it's
He's
amazing, guys. The Georgia, you want Georgia players, I think, on your football team, right? I think they've
you would
proven
think.
themselves a good football program, at least the last couple of years. If you can draft these guys to play on your team, you're probably getting a good football player. Now, as far as Keely Ringo goes, I think this fit is the second best fit for him. I think the Seahawks would be the best fit for him, uh, with Pete Carroll and his defensive back wizardry. He could just take any guy basically and turn him into a Pro Bowler. But especially you give him a guy with a lot of talent. And Ringo's got all the talent in the world. And Philadelphia's coaching can bring him along. And he wouldn't even be expected to be the guy because Joey Porter in this scenario would have gone as well. So Ringo's a guy that I think in a couple of years, if he gets the right coaching and pulls his talent together, can be the top corner in this draft. At the very least, I think he competes for Pro Bowl honors and becomes a very good starter, and getting that with a 30th pick. Kind of like Will Levis the pick before. It's like without the notoriety. It's a high upside with a high bust potential as well. Super
Right.
Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs on the clock. Steven makes the last pick in this draft.
With the last pick in the first round, I'm the Chiefs GM. I'm sitting here with the greatest quarterback of all time and Patrick Mahomes, physical talent wise, at least in my opinion. I got to keep feeding him. Travis Kelce is the greatest tight end, greatest receiving tight end in the history of football, but he ain't getting any younger. That said, I want to get a guy that can learn from him and hopefully become, comparable to him. Because without a tight end, that offense may not be as good as it is. But that said, I'm taking the tight end from Notre Dame, Michael Mayer. There, I have him as my number 2 tight end in the draft behind Big Darnell, and I think he would obviously fit perfect in that offense. He can catch, can block, and learn from the best. So great
Let me
pick there.
let me ask you a question. Are the Chiefs allowed to play Travis Kelce and Michael Mayer on the field at the same time?
I do believe you can have a
Who
12
knew?
personnel.
Right? For all you out there to make,
uh,
how can they draft Mayer when they have Kelce? Steven answered the question for you guys. For one thing, yes, Kelce is, I mean, he's definitely not slowing down yet, but I remember a guy named Ben Coates. You might remember that name. You might be too young. You might be too young to have seen him. This guy went from all pro to almost useless overnight. And it was shocking to me at the
Russell
time.
Westbrook, is that who you're talking about?
Oh
Russell
yeah,
Westbrook. Russell.
that could be a thing too. Yeah, but for some reason, tight ends when they stop being good, they really
They really
stop
stopped.
being good.
Kyle
So
Rudolph.
yeah, Kyle Rudolph did the same thing, but for me, it was Ben Coates. I always remember. I'm like this. It was always him and Shannon Sharp were the two best
Shannon.
tight ends in football, right? And 2 years later, Ben Coates was Shannon Sharp's backup. So I mean, it was just weird. And
Yeah.
they won a Super Bowl together with Baltimore, but yeah, sometimes tight ends fall off a cliff, and we're not expecting that out of Kelsey anytime soon. But even that being the case, they were allowed to be on the field at the same time.
Yeah.
And just imagine the matchup nightmares. I love that pick. I'm not
Could
even a
you
big Mayer fan, but I love that pick.
if you could imagine, say, we do like a swaps and the Bills go with Mayer and Darnell goes to the Chiefs. Good
I
Lord.
mean, that could
Like
be
that offense is unbelievable.
that
Like
could be something too. And
uh
yeah.
Jesus.
So, so folks, that is our first round. And it's not the way Steven would have done it. It's not the way I would have done it, but it's the way we did it. And
That's what made it fun.
that's what made it fun because there's guys that I took that he wouldn't take, at
No.
least not that high. And there's guys he took I wouldn't take that high. And that's how it
Right.
works in the NFL. Tim Tebow said it best. To be a first round pick, it just takes one team to take you.
One
You
team to
know,
believe.
31 teams can think you're not a first rounder, and one can, and that'll make you a first round pick. So those are our picks. Again, this is the beginning of free agency. I didn't consider free agency because take the best player. That didn't matter to me. We like I said, we referenced it and whatnot here and forth, back and forth. But the draft is end of April. So by that point, I don't know the exact day. It's too early to know that. But we will do a predictive mock draft where actually Steven and I will get together beforehand and come up with a two-person consensus about who will be in what spot, and we'll present that to you guys as well. And that's going to be us trying to be right. So we'll grade ourselves on that one when the time
I
comes around.
can't
But
wait.
guys, I'm going to let you know a couple things. Number one, today is International Pi Day. 3.14. It's March 14th. It's for all the math nerds out there, rejoice in that, please. Uh,
Right.
I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys a spiel again. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel. We need the help. We need the support, guys. We'd love to hear from you guys. We want to know how much you agree or disagree with our picks. What you would do differently. I mean, we love debate, and whenever you can provide us any of that, it gets us excited too. So please hit that subscribe button. Very, very important to us. It's very meaningful to us, and we thank you in advance for doing so. I'm going to kick it over to Steven to sign us off. From me, thank you all for listening, and I will see you next time. Steven.
Yeah, give us a follow on Twitter at Catching Flies W1. I'm on Facebook. Pete's on Facebook. And so, with that being said, for Pete, I'm Stephen Burton. Join us next week for another great episode. And until then, go catch another fly.